All right, now that we've learned how to create a function and make a table out of it, we're going to add another step and add graphing. So our first example, my function right here, is y equals negative 2x minus 4. And I've already started the table, and whenever I create a table, I always want to start out with 0, and then I want to have some negative values and some positive values. And that helps me really get an idea of how my function is going to respond to the different x's that I put in. So in my calculator, I'm going to go a little bit quick here, walk you through the first one, and then we're going to pause the video and you can fill in the rest of it, just like we practiced last week. So since 2 is squished up next to the x, I'm going to multiply 2 times my first x, negative 2, and then subtract 4. When I put that into my calculator, I get a negative 8 as my solution. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I want you to do the same. Fill out the rest of that table, and then we'll come back and compare, make sure we have the same answers. All right, looking over my y column, make sure that you have those negative signs, that you have them in the correct order, and if you caught on to a pattern, that's great. Remember that the patterns really do show up, so it's a great way to try to check your work as long as your x's are in order. So now that we have our table completed, we're going to move on to our coordinates. And coordinates are just another word for those ordered pairs. And you may remember that from elementary school or last year, but our ordered pairs always start out with the x and then the y, and they're in parentheses with a comma in between them. A good way to remember what comes first, x comes first in the alphabet, so we're going to use that one at the beginning of our ordered pair. So I already filled in all the x's. We're going to go ahead and fill in the y's that we got. So when x equaled negative 2, my y value was negative 8. When x was negative 1, my y value was negative 6. I'm just going to keep filling this out as we go. Now that I have all of those coordinates, I'm going to go ahead and now I'm going to make them into a graph. So let's talk about the different pieces of our graph here. This dark line in the center going horizontal, or going left to right, that's the x-axis. The same dark line that goes vertically from the top to the bottom, that's my y-axis. And then there's one more piece that's really important in my graph here, and that's that center piece where my two axes cross. That's that point 0, 0. And that's also called the origin. And that's where we always start when we're graphing. We always want to start at the point 0, 0 and then move our pencil as we go. So let's start with this first coordinate here. And I'm going to get a crazy pen so I can see my points as I graph them. So I have my x here, this negative 2, and I know that it goes with negative 8, but I have to make sure that I put them in the right order. So I'm going to start my pen at 0, 0, and because that x value is negative, I need to move left. Just like on our number line, our negative values are to the left. So I'm going to move 2 spaces, and you can see my pen here. I'm going to move 2 spaces left, and then my y value is also negative. So think about your vertical number lines, those thermometers that we drew. Whenever we had a negative temperature, it was below 0. So I'm going to move down 8 spaces and put my point right there. So that's my first coordinate, negative 2, negative 8. I'm going to go a little bit quicker with the next one. So my point negative 1, again, I'm going to go left 1 space and then down 6. And each time I'm going back to the origin to start over. My next point is the point 0, negative 4. And since my x value is 0, I don't need to move left or right. I'm just going to move down 4 spaces and put my dot. Then I've got 1, negative 2. This time I'm going to move right because the 1 was positive. And then my last point that I found was 2, 0. So I'm going to move right 2 spaces, and I don't need to move up or down. And you can see that all of my dots are making a pretty straight line here. So I'm going to go ahead and connect those as best as I can. And I want you to do the same on your paper. We want to see that line of the function. So you can see that the graph for y equals 2x minus 4 is that bright pink dotted line that I drew. Let's go ahead to the second example and keep trying this. So this time my function is y equals negative x plus 5. And remember, when we have a negative in front of the x, we can think about it 2 different ways. Either you can think about it as the opposite, or you can rewrite that to be y equals negative 1x plus 5, if that helps you as well. Just like when we solved our equations. Now this time they did not give us our x values, so I have to go ahead and fill them in. Remember, the first thing I always start with someplace in the middle is I put 0. That's an easy one to solve. That's always what I want to start with. And then I'm going to pick some negatives and some positives. So let's just go ahead and go in order. I'm going to put negative 1, negative 2, 1, and 2. So I'm going to pause my video, and I want you guys to go ahead and fill out this table just like we practiced last week. All right, go ahead and check your table with mine. Make sure that you have the correct values. And now we're going to take all of that information and turn it into my ordered pairs or my coordinates. So remember, x comes first and then y. So my first coordinate is negative 2, 7. Then I've got negative 1, 6. 0, 5, 1, 4, and 2, 3. All right, let's go ahead and start graphing now. So remember, we want to start at that origin, that point right at the middle where those 2 dark lines meet. That's the point 0, 0. And I'm going to move my pen as I graph these. So because that first x is negative, I'm going to go ahead and let me grab my crazy pen. So I'm going to start at the origin. Negative 2 goes left. And then because that 7 is positive, I'm going to go up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's where I want to put my coordinate. Negative 1, 6 is going to be 1 below that. 0, 5. And I'm starting to see my pattern here as I go. And then the point 2, 3. And once I have all of my coordinates mapped or graphed on that coordinate plane, then I'm going to go ahead and take that line, and as best as I can, I'm going to connect them. And as we get the hang of graphing, it goes a lot quicker. Just remember that x needs to go first on the x-axis. All right, let's go on to example number 3, and this one is a little bit tricky because I do have a fraction. This time my function is y equals 1/3 x minus 2.
You guys know on your calculator that 1/3, when you divide it, equals 0.333333. That's not going to be something you want to graph. So we're going to have to start thinking which is easier, using the decimal or using the fraction. And we're going to show you an easy way to use the fraction and pick numbers that are easier to see and use with that denominator. So since the denominator is 3, we're going to have something that goes into that denominator. So think about your numbers, 3, 6, 9, 12. So let's start with 0 in the middle, because 0 is always an easy number to use for our input, okay? And then we're going to think about a negative number and a positive number. So we like 3, 6, 9, 12. So let's use 3. We're going to use a negative 3 and a positive 3. And let's use 6, a negative 6 and a positive 6. That way, when we multiply it against a fraction and you multiply across, when you're multiplying fractions. We can turn any of those numbers into a fraction by putting it over 1. So you're going to have to do some of the work on the side of this paper or at the bottom to show that you set it up and use your fraction. So multiply, you can put parentheses around it. So you've got 1/3 and -6 over 1 is going to be your fraction. Multiply across, you get -6 over 3. And that can reduce to a -2.
All right, so let's go ahead and do another one here. I'm going to do this one in order. If I, okay, hold on. We're not done. Go and raise to -2 out of your y coordinates. Okay, so we've only finished the fraction part. We still have to go back and subtract the -2 from y equals 1/3 x minus 2. So -2 minus 2. That's like adding the opposite. A -2 plus a -2, okay, would give me a what? A 0. so -2 plus a -2. That's like 2 sets of 2 negatives. Owing $2 to 2 different people is a -4. So that's my answer for this one.
Sorry guys, we got to remember to do that constant number at the bottom, okay? So now we've got the first 2 coordinates, and you can put those into your y and x axis, so that'll be -6, -4. Now we're going to have to erase the work, and we're going to go back and do the 1/3 again. It's going to get easier as you see it. But the fractions are going to work out nice because we gave input numbers nice. So 1/3 times a -3 over 1. So that's a -3 divided by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. And now -1 minus that extra -2. So we've got a -1 plus a -2 is a -3. You can either put this into your calculator, guys, or you can go back to adding the opposite if you like to write it down. So -3 is our next coordinates. Okay, we're going to do one more, and then we're going to let you do the last 2 since they're positive by yourself. 0 is really easy. 1/3 times 0. 0 can't be a fraction. Any number times 0 is 0. And 0 minus 2 is a -2. So 0 and -2 are the next 2 coordinates. Now we're going to pause the video, and you're going to go and you're going to try to take that 1/3 fraction and multiply it times 3 over 1 and 6 over 1. Okay, now take a look at your chart. Your table should look like ours if you finished the 3 and the 6 multiplying by 1/3. So you should have got a -1 and a 0 and fill in the coordinates. Now we're going to take all of our coordinates and we're going to plot them on our axis. And our x and y axis needs to get marked first. So really quickly, you just need to put down which line's the x, so you'll remember, and which line's the y. You go across the x and down or up. So we're going to look at -6 and -4. So you have to go across -6 to the left, just like a number line, and then you're going to go down 4 spots and draw your dot. Okay, so you've marked that coordinate. Go back to the origin, and now you're going to go over 3 negatives and down 3 and mark your spot. So you see your line starting to form. 0 stays exactly where it is and goes down on that line, -2 spots. 3 is positive, we're moving to the right 3 places, and we're going down 1. And then the last one is over 6 to the right, and we're not getting off that line because it doesn't move up or down. So there's our line from the origin. Now we're going to take our pencil and we're just going to line those up so we can see. You guys need to draw all the way across the whole entire graph because there's more than one point on the graph that would help in our coordinates. We could make a long list of coordinates, but we're not going to. We're going to choose these 5 and stay with something really easy like starting with 0.
All right, so now we've gotten a lot of practice of taking a function, making a table, and creating a graph. If you flip over your note page, it's kind of like going backwards. You see that somebody already made the graph, and I have to pick out the coordinates, put it into a table. So the first thing you always want to do is look for really nice coordinates. I want to find something where the line crosses perfectly on one of these little X's or one of these little T's. I want it to cross perfectly over that. So if you look right here, that doesn't cross perfectly over that line so that I can pick out a coordinate. But this spot right here next to it does. So there are good points and there are bad points, and we need to figure out which ones are the best ones to choose for this graph. So just looking at this, I'm going to start with that first one that I just talked about. All right, so the first one that I saw was here, this little point. And I put my neon dot over that. So as I'm picking out my coordinate here, I'm looking for where it is in relation to the origin. So remember, the origin is that middle section. I move along the x-axis first, and then the y. So I've got to walk over to the elevator before I can take it up and down. So that point is the point +1, +3. Let's look for another one. I'm looking at those axes and I'm seeing that there's one that's really nice right here. And that's actually a really easy one to spot out because it has the 0 on it. So I don't have to move left or right, I just move up 1. So that's the point 0, 1. And I can see that that one's already even started in my coordinate list. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in the 1. I know that 0, when x is 0, y is going to be 1. So let's use some of these starters that they've given us. Let's look for +2. So at +2, when x is +2, y is way up here. That's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm picking apart these pieces. So between 0 and 1, I can put that one that I found. And then I'm betting that there's going to be something at -2 since they gave me that. So let's go ahead and find -2 at the x-axis. And I'm going to move down until I see, so I'm going to draw my line here. I'm moving down until I see it cross perfectly. And there's my point right here where my green line is. So you can see that that's the point -2, -3. And I'm looking for one more. And since I'm going to look for -1 here and see if I can find a point there. So at -1, there's where it crosses. It's actually at -1 on the y-axis too. So I have all my points, and then I can put them directly into the table, just like working backwards what we did on the front side of the sheet.
So we're using the graph, and we're using the missing pieces and the pieces they gave us to fill in the pieces that go with the x and y. So they gave us a -2, so we had to find a -3. If they don't give us something, we can find it on the graph and create our own x and y.
So let's go ahead and try on example number 5.
In example number 5, they only gave us a 0. So 0 is always a good place to start if you don't know what to do. But I see this line and I see a lot of places where it crosses. So not everybody's going to have the same thing. We could do 5 different numbers if the graph kept going and going and going. So let's find some easy ones. Start with 0, start at your origin. And if I just move up 2 spots to 0, +2, I can see that that comes across the line really clean. So 0, 2 are an x and a y for me. So I'm going to go over and find another point on the positive line. If I go over, I see that the line runs right into, okay, a +2. Okay, so 2 over, and it's I didn't move up or down, so that's a 0. So 2, 0 would be a coordinate on the map. Somebody might have gone over and done 1. If you go over to do 1 and up 1, you would have seen that would have been on the graph.
There's a whole lot of points to choose from, so we're just going to keep picking some out. So let's look for another one. What if I go to 4 and move down? I see that that makes a point as well. So I'm going to go ahead and use the point 4, and that went down 2, so it's -2. And you don't have to choose ones that make a pattern. You can just pick out coordinates. As long as it crosses nicely, it's okay to use it. So let's look at -1. If I go to -1 and go up, I see that that one crosses really nicely too. So I can use the point -1, +3. So anywhere that you see a coordinate, you can write down those ordered pairs.
But the graph has to touch that piece. So this example, number 5, there might be a few that you and I have differently, but make sure it's touching the line. For example, if I was to put down the coordinates 4, 4, for +4, +4, and I followed it on this line. I started at the origin, I went over 4 spaces to the right, and I went up 4. 4, 4 would not be a point on my graph. So when you start seeing tables and they ask you to start matching them to graphs, we're going to talk about that more. 4, 4 would not work, so therefore the table wouldn't work for my graph. So we've got to think that things are matching, so it has to be a point on that graph.
All right, let's look at that last example, number 6. This graph is a little bit tricky. We've got to really look for ones that cross nicely. So I do like to start with my axis, my x-axis, or my y-axis. And sometimes I'm just looking for any points that I see, and then I can look for all the coordinates at the end.
So let's just put dots on the paper. Where do they cross? Nice, pretty crosses. Some of them cross through the middle, or they cross for a piece, and you cannot take that corner off. So you make sure that you're looking really closely at the corners to see where they cross.
So I just found 3 coordinates. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'm going to look for some more, and I want you to do the same thing. Try to find as many coordinates as you can on this line. All right, so I was able to actually find 6 points as I was looking at this graph, but I only needed 5 of them. So I picked out 5, found the coordinates, and now I'm ready to go ahead and transfer them into the table. Remember, the x value is what came first, so I've got -4, 1, -2, 0, 0, -1, 2, -2, and 4, -3. And as you're looking at your points, make sure that it crosses perfectly on that line, a really nice cross, because that's what we need to list it as one of our coordinates.
Okay, now that you have the front and the back of the notes completed, you're going to want to keep these notes out, and you're going to want to go on to the practice on IXL. 7th grade U8 and 8th grade Z8 are the 2 practices that go with these note sheets.